The gun was already rising when Katie Morrison threw herself between the bullet and the man in the tailored black suit. In a city where survival means keeping your head down and your eyes on your own plate, one waitress was about to learn that the most dangerous thing you can do is care, and that sometimes the man you save becomes the one who won't let you stay buried in your own past. Welcome to Redemption Stories, where broken people find their way back to the light in the most unexpected places. If you believe that even one impulsive choice can change everything, hit that subscribe button and smash the like to support stories that make you feel something real. Drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. Now, let's see how one bullet changed 2 lives forever. The diner smelled like burnt coffee and desperation. It was 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday in February, and Katie's feet screamed inside her worn sneakers as she refilled the coffee cup of the man in booth 7. She'd been on shift since 3 p.m., her second double that week, and the tips tonight barely covered what she'd need for her mother's medication refill tomorrow. "Thanks, sweetheart." The man didn't look up from his newspaper. Katie recognized the type. Working class, tired, just trying to make it through another night. Like her. The bell above the door chimed. Cold air rushed in, cutting through the overheated diner like a knife. Katie glanced up automatically, her waitress smile, already in place, and felt it freeze on her face. 3 men entered. Not the usual late-night crowd of truckers and insomniacs. These men wore expensive coats that didn't quite hide the bulk of weapons underneath. Their eyes swept the diner with the practiced efficiency of predators scanning for prey. The temperature in the room dropped, and it had nothing to do with the February wind. Katie's manager, Pete, went pale behind the register. The cook stopped mid-flip. Even the jukebox seemed to go quiet, though that might have been Katie's imagination. Then she saw him. Booth 12, corner seat with his back to the wall. The man she'd been carefully not looking at all evening. Tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a suit that probably cost more than her annual rent. Dark hair perfectly styled, a jaw so sharp it could cut glass, and eyes the color of steel that missed nothing. Jimmy Lawrence. She'd heard the name whispered, never spoken aloud. The most powerful man in Chicago's underworld. And he'd been sitting in her section for the past 40 minutes, drinking black coffee and reading a leather-bound book like he owned the place. Which, she'd heard through the gossip mill, he actually did. Pete paid protection money. Everyone did, in this neighborhood. The 3 men walked toward booth 12. Katie's hands trembled as she set down the coffee pot. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, to become invisible the way she'd learned to survive in this city. "Mr. Lawrence." This lead man had a thick accent, Russian maybe. His hand moved inside his coat. "You made mistake, thinking you could—" Katie didn't think, didn't plan, didn't calculate odds or consequences. She saw the gun clearing the coat, saw the angle, saw the man in the tailored suit who'd left her a $100 tip on a $12 check, who'd said please and thank you, like she was a person instead of furniture. Her body moved before her brain caught up. She threw herself forward, crashed into the gunman's arm just as the trigger pulled. The world exploded in sound and fire and pain that bloomed white-hot across her left shoulder, spinning her sideways into the booth. Someone screamed. Maybe her. Everything blurred into a confusion of shouting and movement. Then strong hands caught her before she hit the floor. Katie blinked up through tears of pain and saw steel-gray eyes staring down at her with something that looked like shock. Jimmy Lawrence had moved faster than she would have thought, possible for a man his size, one arm catching her weight, the other already holding a gun that had appeared from nowhere. "Stay down." His voice was low, controlled, but she heard something underneath it, something that might have been fury or fear. 3 shots. Sharp and precise as a surgeon's cuts. Katie flinched with each one, but she couldn't look away from his face, the cold control, the absolute certainty. the complete lack of hesitation. This was what power looked like. This was what it meant to be untouchable. Bodies hit the floor. Not his. The gunman. "Pete," Jimmy's voice cut through the shocked silence. "Call my doctor. Now. Not 911. My doctor." "But she needs..." Pete's voice shook. "My doctor will be here in 6 minutes. Move." Katie tried to speak, but her tongue felt thick. The pain in her shoulder was spreading, turning her whole left side into liquid fire. She could feel wetness soaking through her cheap polyester uniform, warm and sticky. "Don't." Jimmy shifted her. "Wait." And she realized he'd lowered them both to the floor, cradling her against his chest. His hand pressed against her shoulder, hard enough to make her gasp. "Don't try to talk. Don't try to move. Just breathe." "I'm sorry." The words came out slurred. "About your suit." Something flickered across his face, almost like pain. "You jumped in front of a bullet for me and you're apologizing for bleeding on my suit?" "Expensive." She was fading, the edges of her vision going dark and sparkly. "Looked expensive." "Katie." How did he know her name? "Katie, stay with me. Look at me." She tried. God, she tried. But the darkness was warm and soft, and she was so tired. 9 years of working doubles, of swallowing pride, of choosing between food and medicine, of dancing alone in her studio apartment at 2 a.m. to remember what it felt like to fly. 9 years, and it all ended here, on the floor of a diner, in the arms of a man she didn't know, a man she'd just died for. "I've got you." His voice followed her down into the dark. "I've got you, and I don't let go of what's mine." The last thing she felt was his hand in her hair, impossibly gentle for someone who'd just killed 3 men without blinking. When Katie's eyes finally closed, Jimmy Lawrence did something he hadn't done in 23 years. He prayed. The first thing Katie became aware of was softness. Not the lumpy third-hand mattress she'd slept on for 7 years. Not the scratchy hospital sheets from the Boy Free Clinic. This was Egyptian cotton, high thread count, the kind of luxury she'd only touched once when she'd cleaned houses during college to pay for dance shoes. The second thing was the absence of pain. Her shoulder should hurt. She remembered fire, remembered wet heat spreading across her chest, remembered steel gray eyes, and a voice promising he had her. Katie's eyes snapped open. The room was enormous. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed Chicago's skyline glittering in morning light. The bed she lay in could fit 4 people comfortably. Everything was cream and gold and expensive in a way that made her stomach clench with anxiety. She sat up too fast. The room spun, and a dull ache bloomed in her shoulder. But it was manageable. Professional. Like someone who knew exactly what they were doing had put her back together. The door opened. Jimmy Lawrence filled the doorway, wearing dark slacks and a white dress shirt with the sleeves rolled up. Even dressed down, he looked dangerous, like violence wrapped in civilization. "You're awake." He didn't sound surprised. "How's the pain?" "Where am I?" Her voice came out rough, dry. "My home." He stepped inside, and she noticed he was carrying a tray. Coffee, toast, eggs that smelled like they'd been made by someone who actually knew how to cook. "You've been out for 36 hours. My doctor said you'd wake today." "Your doctor?" Katie's hands fisted in the sheets. Anger cut through the fog of whatever painkillers were in her system. "Not a hospital. Your doctor." A hospital would have asked questions, filed reports, made you a target. He set the tray on the nightstand, his movements precise. "The men who came for me have friends. Witnesses are liabilities. I'm a witness. You're under my protection." He said it like it was simple. Like her entire life hadn't just been rearranged without her permission. "Which means you're safe. Eat." Katie stared at the food. Her stomach growled, traitor that it was. She hadn't eaten anything this nice in... She couldn't remember. But accepting it felt like accepting everything else. The room. The protection. The debt she now owed to a man who killed 3 people while she bled in his arms. I need to leave. She pushed back the covers, ignoring the way the room tilted. I have work. My mother needs... Your mother is at Sacred Heart Extended Care. Stage 4 cancer, currently stable. His voice was clinical, but his eyes watched her face carefully. I've paid the facility through the end of the year. Her medications are covered. The staff has been informed you're dealing with a family emergency. Katie's breath stopped in her chest. You... What? You took a bullet for me. Did you think I'd let your mother go without care while you recovered? You had no right... Rage and humiliation burned up her throat. No right to go digging into my life, to pay for things I didn't ask for, to... You almost died. For the first time, his control cracked. Just a hairline fracture, but she heard it. On the floor of a diner, bleeding out because you threw yourself in front of a gun aimed at me. What right does that give you to refuse basic human decency? I don't need charity from a... She stopped herself, but not fast enough. From a criminal? He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Say it. I've heard worse. Katie forced herself to meet his gaze. From anyone. I take care of my own problems. By working 80-hour weeks for minimum wage while your mother dies slowly and you... He stopped, turned away from her. When he spoke again, his voice was carefully neutral. While you what, Katie? Something in his tone made her skin prickle. What are you talking about? He crossed to the dresser, opened the top drawer, pulled out something that made Katie's heart stop. Her ballet shoes, not the worn practice slippers she kept in her apartment. These were point shoes, pink satin faded to gray, ribbons frayed from years of use. She'd packed them in her locker at the diner because looking at them at home hurt too much. The hospital needed your belongings. Jimmy's fingers traced the ribbons with unexpected gentleness. I had someone collect them from your locker. These were underneath your work uniforms. Katie couldn't breathe, couldn't speak. So I made some calls. He set the shoes on the dresser like they were made of glass. Katie Morrison, Juilliard School, class of 2019, full scholarship, principal dancer in 3 productions. Professors said you were the most talented student they'd seen in a decade. He turned to face her. You left 2 months before graduation. No explanation. Just disappeared. Stop. The word came out broken. Your mother was diagnosed that January. Stage 3, already metastasized. The treatment wasn't covered by insurance. You chose. I said stop. You gave up everything. He moved closer, and she saw something in his eyes that terrified her more than the guns, more than the violence, understanding. The scholarship, the future, your dreams. You gave it all up to take care of her. Tears burned down Katie's face. She hated them. Hated that he'd uncovered her most carefully buried shame. Not that she'd sacrificed, but that some part of her still mourned what she'd lost. She's my mother. Her voice shook. What else was I supposed to do? Jimmy was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was softer than she'd heard it. My mother was a pianist, conservatory trained. She could have been great. Past tense. Could have been. What happened? Katie asked, even though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. My father happened. He didn't like that she was better at something than he was. Didn't like that people praised her instead of him. So he made sure she never played again. Jimmy's jaw tightened. Broke 3 fingers on her left hand when I was 7. Told everyone she fell down the stairs. Katie's stomach twisted. She died when I was 13. Never touched a piano after that night. And every day she didn't play, I watched a piece of her die. He met Katie's eyes. So when I see someone who gave up their dreams for family, who works themselves to death out of love, who still keeps the shoes hidden in their locker like a secret, I understand. Understanding doesn't change anything. Katie wiped her face with the back of her hand. I made my choice. I'd make it again. I know. He moved to the door. But you didn't choose to get shot. That debt is mine to pay. So your mother's care is covered, and you're staying here until the people who want me dead know that touching you means war. I don't want to owe you. Then don't think of it as debt. He paused in the doorway. Think of it as me settling my own accounts. Eat. Rest. We'll talk about the rest later. He left before she could argue. Katie sat in the enormous bed, in a room that cost more than she'd ever owned, holding her coffee with shaking hands. And for the first time in 9 years, she let herself cry for everything she'd lost. 3 days in Jimmy Lawrence's mansion, and Katie learned that luxury was its own kind of prison. The house was beautiful in a cold, untouchable way. Marble floors that echoed every footstep. Artwork that probably cost more than her mother's entire medical bill. Rooms so perfectly arranged they looked like museum displays, not places where actual humans lived. Katie spent most of her time in the guest room, venturing out only when hunger or boredom drove her to explore. The kitchen was industrial-sized, staffed by a silent chef who prepared meals she barely touched. The library held thousands of books she was afraid to open. Everything screamed money and power and don't touch. She hated it. On the 4th morning, she woke before dawn out of habit. Her body still expected the alarm for the breakfast shift, the rush to get dressed, the commute on the L train packed with other exhausted workers. Instead, she lay in Egyptian cotton, sheets watching the sun rise over Lake Michigan through windows so clean they were invisible. Her shoulder ached. The wound was healing well according to the doctor who visited daily, but the muscle would need physical therapy. Another debt. Another thing she couldn't pay back. Katie threw off the covers. She couldn't stay in bed anymore, couldn't sit still while her life happened somewhere else without her. She found workout clothes in the dresser. Expensive athleisure that fit perfectly because, of course, Jimmy had bought her entire wardrobe in her exact size. The thought made her skin crawl with embarrassment, and something else she didn't want to examine. The house was silent as she crept downstairs. She'd noticed the gym on her 2nd day, visible through glass doors off the main hallway. State-of-the-art equipment, mirrors covering one wall, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the grounds, and most importantly, a bar. Katie's breath caught when she saw it. Professional grade, mounted at the perfect height, wood worn smooth from use. Who in Jimmy Lawrence's world used a ballet bar? She didn't let herself think. Just crossed to the bar, wrapped her good hand around it, and lifted into first position. Pain lanced through her shoulder. Her body was stiff from days of inactivity, from 9 years of not dancing properly, from carrying the weight of survival instead of the lightness of art. But God, it felt like coming home. She worked through basic exercises, modifying, for the injury, ignoring the tears that slid down her face. Tendu, dégagé, rond de jambe. The French terms were prayers on her tongue, muscle memory overriding conscious thought. She didn't hear him enter. Didn't know he was there until she caught his reflection in the mirror. Jimmy stood in the doorway, wearing sweatpants and a t-shirt that revealed more of his body than the suits did. Muscular arms, broad chest, a physical power that came from discipline, not just genetics. He'd been working out, she realized, probably in some other part of this massive house. but he wasn't looking at her body. He was looking at her face. "I didn't know you still danced," he said quietly. Katie lowered from releve, breathing hard. "I don't. Not really. This isn't dancing. It's just muscle memory." It looked like more than that. She turned to face him, suddenly self-conscious. "The bar. Who uses it?" Something flickered across his face. "It was my mother's. I had it moved here after she died." "Couldn't." He stopped, started again. "I couldn't throw it away." The air between them shifted. Katie saw past the tailored suits and controlled violence to the boy who'd watched his mother's dreams die slowly, one broken finger at a time. "She would have been beautiful," Katie said. "Playing, I mean. You can tell by the wear on the wood. She practiced here a lot. Every day, even after." His jaw tightened. Even after he made sure she'd never perform again, she still practiced. Like if she kept the muscle memory, maybe she could will the fingers to work. Katie's chest ached. That's not pathetic. That's love. Love for what? Something she'd never have again? Love for the art itself. It's not about performing or being seen. It's about the feeling. The way your body knows what to do, even when your mind is chaos. The one moment of control in a world that's constantly taking pieces of you. She met his eyes. Your mother didn't practice because she thought she'd perform again. She practiced because it was the only part of herself your father couldn't take. Jimmy stared at her like she'd just handed him something precious and fragile. Then his phone buzzed. The moment shattered. He checked the screen, his face going cold and professional. "I have to go. Business." "The kind that ends with bodies?" She didn't know why she asked, didn't know why she cared. "The kind that keeps bodies from piling up." He moved toward the door, then stopped. "Stay inside today. My men will be outside if you need anything. I'm not a prisoner." "No." He looked back at her. "You're someone I'm trying to keep alive. There's a difference." After he left, Katie stood alone in the gym, staring at the bar that held 2 decades of grief. She thought about Jimmy's mother, practicing alone in this room while her dreams turned to ash. She thought about the boy who'd kept the bar for 23 years, because throwing it away would be admitting she was really gone. And she thought about the man who looked at her like she was solving a puzzle he'd given up on years ago. That evening, Katie found him in his office. She'd been exploring, restless and angry at feeling useless. The office was on the 2nd floor, door slightly ajar, warm light spilling into the hallway. Jimmy sat behind a massive desk, reading glasses perched on his nose, reviewing documents with the focused intensity of a surgeon. He looked different like this. Older, more tired, human. "I want to do something," Katie said from the doorway. He glanced up. "Such as?" "I don't know. Cook, clean, organize your library. Anything. I can't just sit in that room like a doll on a shelf." "You're recovering from a gunshot wound." "My shoulder is healing. The rest of me is going crazy." She stepped inside. "You said I'm not a prisoner. Prove it. Let me contribute something." Jimmy set down his pen. "What did you do? Before the diner?" The question caught her off guard. "I worked 3 jobs. Waitress at night, cleaning, houses in the morning, teaching ballet to kids on weekends at the rec center." "You taught dance while working 80-hour weeks?" "Those kids needed it. Some of them came from homes worse than mine. Dance was the only place they felt safe." She crossed her arms. "I gave it up when I had to pick up extra shifts for Mom's treatments. That was 2 years ago." Something in his expression softened. "There's a community center 3 blocks from here. St. Catherine's. They have an after-school program. I know it. I applied there once. They couldn't afford to hire anyone. They can now. Jimmy pulled out his phone, typed quickly. I just made a donation. Enough to hire a dance instructor for the next 5 years. Katie's throat closed. You can't just... I can. And I did. He looked up at her. You want to contribute? Teach those kids. Give them what you had to give up. My driver will take you tomorrow if you're cleared by the doctor. Why? The word came out raw. Why do you care about kids at a community center? Because I was one of those kids once. He removed his glasses, and she saw exhaustion in the lines around his eyes. And because watching you dance this morning was the first time in 23 years I understood why my mother couldn't let it go, even when it hurt. Katie stood frozen, her heart doing something dangerous in her chest. Thank you, she whispered. Jimmy nodded. There's pasta in the kitchen. Mrs. Chen made enough to feed an army. You should eat. It was a dismissal, but a gentle one. Katie turned to leave, then paused. Jimmy? Yes? Your mother would be proud of who you became, not the empire, not the power, the fact that you remembered what mattered to her. She left before he could respond, but she heard it anyway. The sharp intake of breath. The quiet sound of grief finally finding air. The community center smelled like floor wax and hope. Katie stood in the converted gymnasium watching 12 kids between ages 5 and 9 attempt first position with varying degrees of success. Some had natural grace. Others moved like baby deer on ice. All of them looked at her like she held magic. Miss Katie, am I doing it right? A little girl with dark braids and a gap-toothed smile wobbled in releve. Almost, sweetie. Engage your core. Pull your belly button to your spine. There you go. Teaching again felt like breathing after being underwater. The kids didn't care that she'd given up Juilliard, that she worked as a waitress, that she'd been shot protecting a criminal. They only cared that she showed up, that she saw them, that she made them feel like their bodies could do extraordinary things. Jimmy's driver, Marcus, waited outside in the black SUV. He'd been her shadow for 2 weeks now, silent and professional. Katie had stopped arguing about the security. The men who'd tried to kill Jimmy were part of a larger organization, he'd explained. Loose ends had a way of getting tied up violently. After class, Katie packed up the portable bar she'd brought, another gift from Jimmy that appeared without discussion. As she walked to the car, a little boy ran up to her. Miss Katie, wait. He thrust a crayon drawing into her hands. I made this for you. The drawing showed stick figures dancing under a rainbow. In the corner, careful letters spelled out, Thank you for teching me to be brave. Katie's vision blurred. This is beautiful, Michael. Thank you. She carried the drawing like treasure all the way back to the EU mansion. Jimmy was in the gym when she arrived, working through combinations on a heavy bag. No shirt, just workout pants and wraps on his hands, his body a study in controlled violence. Muscles moved under skin marked with scars, a roadmap of survival in a world that didn't forgive weakness. He saw her in the mirror and stopped mid-punch. How was it? Perfect. Katie held up the drawing. Look what Michael made me. Jimmy crossed to her, breathing hard from exertion, and studied the crayon. Figures with unexpected focus. You're good with them. They're easy to be good with. Kids that age, they just need someone to show up consistently, to prove they matter. She set the drawing carefully on the bench. That's all any of us really need, I think. Is that what you needed? Someone to show up? The question was too close, too knowing. Katie turned away, pretending to adjust her bag. My mom showed up. Every recital, every performance. even when she could barely afford the bus fare. That's why I couldn't let her die alone in some state facility. And your father? Gone before I was born. Mom never talked about him much. Just said some men aren't built for staying. Jimmy was quiet for a moment. Mine was built for staying. I wish he hadn't been. There it was again. The crack in his armor. The glimpse of the wounded boy underneath. Katie turned to face him. How old were you when she died? 13. Pneumonia officially. But really, she just gave up. His hands flexed, the wraps pulling tight across his knuckles. After the night he broke her fingers, something in her broke too. She stopped fighting, stopped caring if she lived or died. That's not giving up. That's trauma. It's different. Is it? His eyes met hers, and she saw something raw there. Because sometimes I wonder if I inherited it. The inability to let people in. The certainty that everyone I care about will be destroyed by my world. Katie stepped closer without thinking. You let me in. You forced your way in by taking a bullet for me. And you could have dumped me at a hospital and disappeared. But you didn't. You paid for my mother's care. You gave me a job. You kept your mother's bar for 23 years because throwing it away felt like killing her twice. She reached out, hesitated, then placed her hand over his wrapped knuckles. That's not inability to care. That's someone who cares so much it terrifies him. Jimmy stared at her hand on his. You should be afraid of me. I was, at first. Her thumb traced the edge of the wrap. But I've spent 2 weeks in your house. I've watched you with the staff. You know all their names, their kids' names, their problems. I've seen you take calls from people begging for help and actually help them instead of just taking their money. And I've seen you look at your mother's bar like it's both precious and painful, which tells me everything I need to know about who you really are. What I really am, he said roughly, is someone who kills people who threaten what's mine. I know. She didn't flinch. I've seen the news. I know what you do. But I also know you've been threatened 3 times since I've been here, and you haven't killed anyone. You've negotiated, compromised, found other ways. That's because you're here. His free hand came up, cupping her face with a gentleness that stole her breath. You make me want to be the man my mother hoped I'd become, instead of the one my father tried to create. Katie's heart hammered against her ribs. Jimmy. The door burst open. A man in a suit rushed in, face pale. Boss, we have a problem. Dimitri knows about the girl. The air in the room crystallized. Jimmy's hand dropped from Katie's face, his entire body shifting into something cold and lethal. What does he know? Everything. Where she works, where she's staying, what she means to you. The man's eyes flicked to Katie. He's demanding a meeting. Says if you don't show, he'll consider her fair. Game. Katie's stomach dropped. Who's Dimitri? The man whose soldiers you killed when you saved me. Jimmy's voice was flat, emotionless. He wants compensation. Or blood. Then give it to him. Katie forced the words out. Whatever he wants. Money, territory, I don't care, just end this. It's not that simple. Jimmy turned to his man. Tell Dimitri I'll meet him. Neutral ground. Tomorrow night. Boss. Tomorrow night. Make it happen. He waited until the man left, then faced Katie. His expression was carved from stone. Pack a bag. Marcus is taking you somewhere safe. No. This isn't negotiable. You're right. It's not. Katie stood her ground even as her legs trembled. Because I'm not running. This started because I saved your life. I'm not going to hide while you risk yours to protect mine. You don't understand what these men are capable of. I understand that you've spent 2 weeks showing me a different life. Teaching me that maybe I deserve more than survival. Making me believe in second chances. Her voice broke. So don't you dare send me away like I'm just a problem to be solved. I'm a person who cares about you, and people who care don't run. Jimmy stared at her like she'd struck him. You don't care about me. You care about who you think I could be. I care about both. She closed the distance between them. The man who kills without hesitation to protect what's his, and the man who kept his mother's bar because love doesn't die just because the person does. You don't get one without the other. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then Jimmy's hand was in her hair, his forehead pressed against hers, his breath ragged against her mouth. If anything happens to you because of me, he whispered, I'll burn this entire city to the ground. Then make sure nothing happens to either of us. He kissed her, not gently, not carefully, like a man who'd been holding back for weeks and finally broke. Katie kissed him back, pouring every ounce of frustration and fear and impossible hope into the press of her mouth against his. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Jimmy rested his forehead against hers. Tomorrow night, he said quietly, I meet with Dmitri. You stay here with armed guards at every entrance. That's the compromise. Tomorrow night, Katie agreed. But after, no more running, no more hiding. We figure this out together. Together. He said the word like it was foreign, dangerous, like it might save him or destroy him, and he couldn't tell which. Katie thought about the little boy's drawing, about teaching kids to be brave when she'd spent 9 years being afraid. Maybe it was time to take her own advice. The 24 hours before the meeting crawled by like years. Katie taught her class at the community center with Marcus watching from the corner, his hand never far from the gun under his jacket. The kids sensed her tension and grew quiet, their usual exuberance dampened by her mood. Are you okay, Miss Katie? The little girl with braids asked after class. You look sad. Katie forced a smile. Just tired, sweetie. I'll be better tomorrow. If there was a tomorrow. Back at the mansion, Jimmy was locked in his office with men who came and went in expensive suits and grim expressions. Katie caught fragments of conversation, negotiations, contingencies, backup plans if things went wrong. She tried to distract herself in the library, but the words on the page might as well have been gibberish. Her mind kept circling back to the meeting, to all the ways it could end in blood. Around 8 p.m., Jimmy finally emerged. He looked exhausted, the lines around his eyes deeper than usual. When he saw Katie curled in the armchair by the window, something in his expression softened. You should eat, he said. So should you. I'm not hungry. Neither am I. Katie uncurled from the chair. But we're both going to eat anyway because collapsing from low blood sugar before a dangerous meeting seems counterproductive. The corner of his mouth twitched. When did you get bossy? When I realized I care if you live or die. They ate in the kitchen, pasta and salad that neither of them tasted. The silence was heavy but not uncomfortable. Katie found herself memorizing details. The way he held his fork, the slight scar above his left eyebrow, the way he watched her when he thought she wasn't looking. Tell me about Juilliard, Jimmy said suddenly. What was it like before you left? The question surprised her. Why do you want to know? Because tomorrow I might die, and I'd rather spend tonight learning about the things that made you who you are instead of planning for violence. Katie set down her fork. Her chest ached. It was everything. Terrifying and exhilarating and the hardest thing I'd ever done. I'd wake up at 5 a.m. for conditioning, take classes until midnight, fall into bed with muscles screaming, and I loved every second. What was your favorite part? Late, night rehearsals, when it was just me and the piano player and the empty studio. No pressure, no judgment, just movement and music and the feeling that I was touching something bigger than myself. She smiled despite the grief. I was working on Giselle when I left. The mad scene in Act 2. My professor said I made him cry. Because you understood madness? Because I understood loving someone so much you lose yourself. She met his eyes. Giselle forgives the man who destroyed her. Even in death, even knowing he chose someone else, she saves him. My professor said that kind of forgiveness is its own form of insanity. Jimmy was quiet for a moment. Do you think people can really forgive the unforgivable? I think people can choose love over revenge. Whether that's forgiveness or just radical acceptance, I don't know. She reached across the table, took his hand. But I know that holding on to hate destroys you faster than any bullet. His fingers tightened around hers. I've hated, for so long, my father, the world that let my mother suffer, myself for not being strong enough to save her. You were 13. Old enough to do something. You were a child. Katie's voice was fierce. A child who survived a monster and built an empire out of the ashes. That's not failure. That's incredible strength. Jimmy lifted her hand to his mouth, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. You see me differently than I see myself. Good. Because the way you see yourself is distorted by trauma and grief. Maybe it's time to try on a different perspective. They finished dinner in silence, hands still clasped across the table. When they finally stood to clear the plates, Jimmy pulled her into his arms. Whatever happens tomorrow, he said against her hair, I need you to know that meeting you changed something, made me remember what it feels like to want more than survival. Katie held him tighter. You're coming back. We both are. And then we're going to figure out what more looks like. Promise me something. He pulled back to look at her. If things go wrong, if Dimitri's people come here, you run. You take Marcus, and you disappear, and you don't look back. I already told you. Promise me, Katie. His voice was raw. I can face anything except the thought of you dying because of me. Please. She saw the desperation in his eyes, the terror underneath all that control. This wasn't about distrust or thinking her weak. This was about a boy who'd watched his mother die and never forgave himself for not saving her. I promise, she whispered. But only if you promise to come back. I'll do everything in my power. That's not a promise. It's the only one I can make. They stood holding each other in the kitchen, the city lights glittering beyond the windows, both of them pretending tomorrow wasn't coming. The next evening, Katie watched Jimmy dress for the meeting. Black suit, white shirt, no tie. He looked like death itself, beautiful and terrible, and utterly controlled. The guards know their orders, he said, checking his gun with practiced efficiency. Stay inside. Don't answer the door for anyone except Marcus or me. If you hear gunfire, there's a panic room behind the bookshelf in my office. Code is 0418. Your mother's birthday. He looked up, surprised. How did you know? You mentioned once that she was an April baby. The bar has initials carved underneath. ML, April 18th. Katie crossed to him. You keep her close in ways you don't even realize. Jimmy cupped her face in his hands. If I don't come back, you will. But if I don't, everything is taken care of. Your mother's care, your salary from the community center, this house. Stop. Katie covered his mouth with her hand. You're coming back, and we're going to have a very boring conversation about what to have for breakfast. That's the only future I'm accepting. He kissed her palm, then her wrist, then her mouth, deep and desperate and achingly tender. You made me want impossible things, he whispered against her lips. Good. Now go get them. Katie lasted 47 minutes after Jimmy left before her phone rang. Unknown number. Her hands shook as she answered. Hello? Miss Morrison. The voice was accented, Russian, cold as winter. Your man killed my soldiers. This is unacceptable. Dmitri. Then take it up with him. Katie forced steel into her voice. I'm not part of your war. But you are. You became part of it the moment you chose him over your own. Safety. A pause. Such devotion is admirable. Unfortunate, but admirable. What do you want? I want what's owed. But Jimmy Lawrence refuses to see reason. He thinks he can negotiate, can buy his way out of blood debt. The voice hardened. So I'm offering you a choice. Come to the meeting. Convince him to accept my terms. Or watch him die for the crime of caring about you. Katie's blood turned to ice. You're bluffing. Am I? Ask yourself why he hasn't called you in the last hour. Ask yourself why your guards outside suddenly went quiet. Katie ran to the window. The SUV that had been parked in the driveway was gone. The security lights were off. I'll send a car, Dmitri said. You have 5 minutes to decide. Save him or condemn him. Choose wisely. The line went dead. Katie stood frozen, mind racing. This was a trap. Obviously a trap. Jimmy had made her promise to run, to hide, to save herself. But she remembered his face when he talked about his mother. The guilt of not being able to save her. The way it had poisoned his entire life. And she thought about Michael's drawing. Thank you for teaching me to be brave. Katie grabbed her phone and dialed Marcus. No answer. She tried Jimmy. Voicemail. The mansion suddenly felt enormous and empty and utterly silent. 5 minutes. Katie Morrison had spent 9 years making impossible choices, sacrificing dreams for survival, choosing duty over desire. For once, she was going to choose love, even if it killed her. The warehouse district looked like the set of every crime movie Katie had ever seen. Empty buildings, broken streetlights, shadows that moved with predatory intent. The car Dmitri sent was a black sedan driven by a man who didn't speak. Katie sat in the back, hands clenched in her lap, trying not to think about all the ways this could end badly. She'd left a note for Marcus taped to the door. Gone to save him. Don't follow. This is my choice. The car stopped in front of a massive warehouse. Rusted. Metal, shattered windows, the smell of decay and oil. 2 men in dark suits flanked the entrance, assault rifles held with casual competence. Out, the driver said. Katie's legs shook as she climbed from the car. The guards searched her roughly, efficiently, then gestured for her to enter. The warehouse interior was vast and dimly lit. Shipping containers stacked like building blocks, creating corridors and dead ends. In the center, under a single overhead light, she saw them. Jimmy knelt on the concrete, hands zip-tied behind his back, blood trickling from a cut above his eye. 4 men surrounded him, guns drawn, and standing in front of him, smoking a cigarette with lazy arrogance, was a man who could only be Dmitri. Older, maybe 60, with silver hair and the kind of face that had seen too much violence to be surprised by anything. He wore an expensive suit and smiled when he saw Katie. Ah, the ballerina. His accent made the words almost musical. You came. How romantic. Jimmy's head snapped up. When he saw her, his face went white. No, Katie. What the fuck did you... Silence. Dmitri didn't raise his voice, but Jimmy went quiet. You see, Miss Morrison, your man here is stubborn. I offer generous terms. He pays tribute for my fallen soldiers, acknowledges my territory rights. We move forward. Simple. But he refuses. Because your terms include killing me, Jimmy said flatly, which isn't negotiable. Everything is negotiable. Dimitri turned to Katie. But perhaps you can make him see reason. Tell him, sweet girl. Tell him his life is worth more than his pride. Katie's heart hammered. She looked at Jimmy, bleeding, bound, but still defiant, and felt something click into place. This wasn't about territory or tribute. This was about power, about humiliating the man who'd dared to rise above his station, who'd built an empire that rivaled the old guard. And Dimitri had miscalculated. He thought Katie was a weakness, a vulnerability to exploit. He didn't realize. She was a survivor who'd spent 9 years learning how to read people, how to find leverage, how to survive in a world designed to break her. You're right, Katie said, walking toward Dimitri with more confidence than she felt. Everything is negotiable, so let's negotiate. Jimmy made a sound of protest. Katie ignored him. You want tribute? Acknowledgement? That's reasonable. She stopped a few feet from Dimitri, close enough to see the surprise in his eyes. But you're asking the wrong person. Jimmy doesn't make decisions about my safety. I do. Katie, Jimmy's voice was desperate. I said silence. She didn't look at him, kept her eyes on Dimitri. You think taking me out of the equation makes him weak? You're wrong. It makes him uncontrollable. Right now, he's calculating odds, looking for exits, planning how to save me even if it costs him everything. But if you hurt me, you don't get a businessman anymore. You get the monster his father tried to create. Dimitri's smile faded, slightly. But if you let him go, Katie continued, if you accept reasonable tribute without demanding blood, you get something better. You get an ally, someone who respects your power instead of resenting it, someone who'll remember that you chose mercy when you could have chosen violence. And why would I want his alliance? Dimitri asked, but there was interest in his voice now. Because your empire is old, his is new, and the future belongs to people who can adapt, who can see beyond traditional power structures. Katie took a breath. I work with kids in the South Side. You know what they need? Programs, security, adults who give a damn. Jimmy funds those programs. You control that territory. Together, you could build something that makes you both more powerful and more protected than blood ever could. It was a gamble. A wild, desperate gamble based on 2 weeks of watching Jimmy navigate his world, understanding that even criminals wanted legacy, wanted something beyond violence. Dimitri studied her for a long moment. Then he laughed. You have courage, little ballerina. Stupid courage, but courage nonetheless. He turned to Jimmy. This is the woman you jumped in front of a gun for? I jumped in front of a gun for him, Katie corrected. And I'd do it again. Not because I'm weak, but because I choose to protect what matters. Same reason he's kneeling there right now instead of trying to fight his way out. Dimitri took a long drag of his cigarette. You offer community programs, shared territory development, very civilized. I offer a chance for both of you to be more than thugs playing King of the Hill, Katie said. Your choice. The silence stretched so long Katie's knees started to shake. She didn't dare look at Jimmy, didn't dare show any weakness. Finally, Dimitri smiled. Cut him loose. One of the guards moved forward, sliced through Jimmy's zip ties. Jimmy stood slowly, rubbing his wrists, eyes never leaving Katie's face. Tribute will be paid, Dimitri said. Reasonable amount. And we discuss these community initiatives. But understand, this mercy is not weakness. Try to expand into my territory again, and the girl's courage won't save you. Understood, Jimmy said hoarsely. Good. Dimitri gestured to his men. We're done here. Miss Morrison, it was educational meeting you. Try not to jump in front of any more bullets. Such talent would be wasted. The men filed out, taking their weapons and their menace with them. Within minutes, the warehouse was empty except for Katie and Jimmy. The moment they were alone, Jimmy crossed the space between them and grabbed her arms. What the hell were you thinking? His voice shook with fury and fear, and something else. You promised you'd run. I lied. Katie met his eyes steadily. And I'd lie again. You think I was going to hide while you died for me? Yes, that's exactly what I expected because that's what keeps you alive. Well, I'm alive, and so are you. So, apparently, my plan worked better. Jimmy stared at her like she was insane. Then he was kissing her, hard and desperate, his hands in her hair, his body pressed against hers like he could physically absorb her into his skin. Don't ever do that again, he said against her mouth. Don't ever... Christ, Katie. When I saw you walk in... I know. She held his face between her hands. But I had to. Because you were right about your mother. About how not being able to save her poisoned everything. And I couldn't let that be us. I couldn't let you spend the rest of your life hating yourself for my death. So instead, you almost got yourself killed. But I didn't. I read the situation, found leverage, and negotiated a better outcome than either of you were going to reach alone. She smiled shakily. Turns out, 9 years of survival skills translate pretty well to dealing with Russian mobsters. Jimmy laughed, the sound raw and broken. You're incredible. Insane, but incredible. I learned from the best. Katie pressed her forehead to his. Now, can we please go home? I promised Michael I'd teach them pirouettes tomorrow, and I'd really like to not be exhausted from warehouse standoffs. Jimmy held her for another long moment, his heart hammering against hers. Then he pulled out his phone, called Marcus. We're good. Come get us. As they waited for the car, Jimmy kept her wrapped in his arms, his face buried in her hair. I thought I understood what it meant to care about someone, he said quietly. But Katie, when you walked into that warehouse, I understood what it meant to love someone. And it was the most terrifying thing I've ever felt. Katie's breath caught. Jimmy, I love you. He pulled back to look at her. I love your courage and your stupidity, and the way you see the best in everyone, including me. I love that you kept dancing even when it hurt. I love that you negotiated with a crime lord to save my life. And I love that you make me want to be worthy of that. Sacrifice. Tears slid down Katie's face. I love you too, even though you're impossible and overprotective and way too comfortable with violence. We're a disaster. We're perfect. He kissed her again, softer this time, like a promise instead of desperation. When Marcus pulled up, they climbed into the SUV holding hands. And for the first time in either of their lives, the future didn't look like survival. It looked like possibility. 3 months later, spring arrived in Chicago like a benediction. Katie stood in the center of what used to be an abandoned building on the south side, watching contractors install the final mirrors on the studio walls. Sunlight poured through massive windows that had been boarded up for a decade, transforming the space into something that looked like it belonged in a dream. The Morrison Dance Academy. Her name. Her dream. Real. The bars arrive tomorrow, Jimmy said from the doorway. He wore jeans and a black t-shirt, more relaxed than she'd ever seen him in those first weeks. And the sound system should be functional by Friday. Katie turned to face him, her heart doing that stupid flutter it always did when she saw him. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. He crossed to her, pulled her into his arms. You gave up Juilliard to save your mother. You took a bullet to save me. You walked into a warehouse full of armed men to negotiate my freedom. The least I can do is give you a place to share what you love. It's too much. It's not even close to enough. He kissed her temple. Besides, Dimitri's nephew starts classes next week. His mother wants him to have culture and discipline. Who knew crime lords valued the arts? Katie laughed. The partnership with Dimitri had been strange but successful. Jimmy's businesses went legitimate, or at least legitimately gray. Dimitri's territory got community programs that actually helped people, and Katie's dance classes expanded from 1 community center to 4, with plans for this full academy. It wasn't perfect. Jimmy still made decisions she didn't agree with. His world still had violence at the edges. But he was trying. Changing. Becoming the man his mother would have wanted him to be. "Mom called this morning," Katie said. "She's responding well to the new treatment. Doctor says she might go into remission." Jimmy's arms tightened around her. "That's incredible. She wants to meet you, officially. Not just the man who pays my bills, but the man my daughter is in love with." Katie pulled back to look at him. "You ready for that?" "Terrified," he admitted. "But yes." A knock on the door interrupted them. Marcus entered, followed by a small tornado of children, Katie's community center class, led by Michael with his gap-toothed grin. "Miss Katie!" He ran up, waving a piece of paper. "Look, I can write my whole name now." "That's wonderful, Michael." Katie knelt to his level. "Show me." He displayed the paper proudly. Michael James Torres in careful block letters. "Perfect," Katie said. "You've been practicing." "Tio Jimmy helped me." Michael turned to Jimmy with complete trust. "Right, Tio." Jimmy's face did something complicated. Surprise and warmth and a hint of the grief he still carried. "Right, kid. You did the work. I just reminded you to keep your letters straight." The other kids swarmed in, chattering about the new studio, touching mirrors, spinning in the empty space. Katie watched Jimmy crouch down to their level, answering questions, with patience she never would have predicted 3 months ago. This was the man who'd killed 3 men without hesitation, who ran an empire built on fear, who could negotiate $1,000,000 deals and destroy enemies with a single phone call. And he was teaching an 8-year-old how to write his name. "Okay, everyone," Katie called. "Let me show you the new space. This is where you'll all dance when the academy opens." She led them on a tour, pointing out where the bars would go, where the changing rooms were, where the small performance space would let parents watch recitals. The kids absorbed it all with wide-eyed wonder. "Will you teach us here, Miss Katie?" one little girl asked. "Every single day," Katie promised. "And when you're good enough, we'll have a real show, with costumes and lights and an audience, just like I used to do." "Were you famous?" Michael asked. "Not famous, but I was good, and I'm going to help all of you be good too." After the tour, Marcus drove the kids back to the community center. Katie and Jimmy stayed in the empty studio, sitting on the floor with their backs against the mirror. "You're happy," Jimmy said. It wasn't a question. "I am." Katie laced her fingers through his. "I never thought I could have this. The teaching, the academy, you. It felt like wanting too much. And now? Now I think maybe we're allowed to want things, to build things, to believe in more than just survival." She looked at him. "What about you? Are you happy?" Jimmy was quiet for a moment. "I'm not sure I know what happy feels like. I spent so long focused on revenge and power that I forgot there could be anything else. But this?" He gestured to the studio, to their joined hands. "This feels right. Like I'm finally doing what she would have wanted." "Your mom?" "Yeah." His voice was soft. "She used to tell me that art was how we prove we're more than animals, that creating beauty was an act of rebellion against everything ugly in the world. I didn't understand then. But watching you with those kids, seeing them learn that their bodies can do extraordinary things, I get it now." Katie leaned her head on his shoulder. "She'd be proud of you." "I hope so." He kissed the top of her head. "I'm trying." They sat in comfortable silence as the afternoon light shifted, painting the walls gold and amber. "There's something I want to show you," Jimmy said eventually. He stood, pulling her up with him. "Come on." He led her out to the car, drove them, across the city to his mansion. But instead of going inside, he took her around back to a structure she'd never noticed before. A small building separate from the main house, covered in ivy. Jimmy unlocked the door. Inside was a music room. A grand piano dominated the space, its surface dusty but the wood still gleaming. Sheet music covered the walls, framed scores for Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Debussy. And in the corner, sitting on a stand, was a framed photograph of a woman with kind eyes and elegant hands poised over piano keys. "This was hers," Jimmy said quietly. "I couldn't bear to have it in the main house. Too painful. So I locked it up the day after she died and never came back." Katie's throat tightened. 23 years? 23 years. He moved to the piano, lifted the fallboard, pressed a single key. The note rang out, slightly out of tune but still clear. "I thought if I kept it locked away, maybe it would hurt less. But it didn't. It just festered." "What changed?" "You." He looked at her. "You said my mother practiced because it was the only part of herself my father couldn't take. That it wasn't about performing. It was about love for the art itself. And I realized I'd been doing the opposite, taking the thing she loved most and locking it away like a punishment. Jimmy, I want to restore it." He ran his fingers over the keys, creating a soft, discordant melody. "Tune the piano. Frame more of her music. Maybe open it up. Let your academy students use it for their classes. Let the room have life again instead of being a mausoleum." Katie crossed to him, wrapped her arms around him from behind. "She would love that." "I think she would." His hands stilled on the keys. "And I think she'd love you. The way you fight for what matters. The way you refuse to let dreams die. The way you saw something worth saving in a man everyone else fears. I saw what was always there." Katie tightened her hold. "You just needed someone to remind you it existed." Jimmy turned in her arms, cupped her face in his hands. "Marry me." Katie's breath stopped. "What?" "Marry me." His eyes were intense, vulnerable, completely sincere. "I know it's fast. I know my world is complicated and dangerous and probably insane. But I also know that I want to spend the rest of my life proving that I'm worthy of someone who believes in second chances. Someone who makes me want to be better. Someone who loves me anyway." Tears blurred Katie's vision. "You're serious?" "Completely." He smiled, and it transformed his whole face. "I'm asking a woman who jumped in front of a gun for me to please continue making incredibly brave and slightly insane decisions by agreeing to marry a reformed criminal with emotional baggage and a complicated relationship with violence." Katie laughed through her tears. "When you put it that way, is that a yes?" "It's a yes." She kissed him, tasting salt and hope and the future neither of them had dared to imagine. "It's absolutely a yes." Jimmy lifted her off her feet, spinning her in the music room while his mother's piano watched with silent blessing. When he set her down, Katie moved to the piano, sat on the bench, touched the keys gently. "Play something," Jimmy said. "I don't know how." "Neither did I. But I'm learning that sometimes you just have to try." So Katie pressed keys at random, creating something that was barely music, but filled the room with sound. And Jimmy sat beside her, adding his own notes, until together they created something beautiful from the broken pieces of the past. Outside, the sun set over Chicago. Inside, two people who'd spent their lives surviving finally learned what it meant to live. Sometimes the people who save us aren't the ones we expected. Sometimes they're the ones the world told us to fear. And sometimes, the greatest act of courage isn't throwing yourself in front of a bullet. It's choosing to believe that broken people can heal, that dreams can be rebuilt, and that love is always, always worth the risk. Katie Morrison learned to dance again. Not at Juilliard, not on prestigious stages, but in a studio on the South Side where kids who needed magic more than technique could learn that their bodies were capable of extraordinary things. Jimmy Lawrence learned to hope again, not for power or revenge, but for the simple possibility of being more than his father's legacy, of creating beauty instead of fear. And together, they learned that redemption isn't about erasing the past. It's about having the courage to write a different future. If this story reminded you that everyone deserves a second chance, that love can find us even in the darkest places, we'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What moment hit you hardest? What would you have done in Katie's place? Share your story with us. Hit that like button to support more tales of redemption and hope. Subscribe to Redemption Stories for new emotional journeys every single day. Stories of broken people finding their way back to light, of impossible love, of courage when it matters most. Before you go, check out our playlist for more stories about mafia bosses finding their hearts, single mothers proving their strength, and second chances that change everything. We have dozens of journeys waiting for you. Thank you for being here. Thank you for believing that even the most broken among us can heal. Until next time, stay safe, stay hopeful, and remember, sometimes the most dangerous thing you can do is care, but it's also the most beautiful. Good night.